Hi, I'm Tammy Beilstein. Welcome to Tammy's Window on Calaveras. I am so happy tonight to have these two people with me. This is Katie Greer from the Senior Peer Counseling and Patrick Arbore from the Friendship Line. I have actually, you guys, I don't know if you know this, but I've actually referred people to their groups in my day job. But I only know the basics, you know, like what probably most people imagine you do just by your titles. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what you do, the details. Yes. So, who should we start with? You guys are two totally separate programs, but you work together.
Correct.
Okay.
We have joined a collaboration to be able to reach the seniors in Calaveras County to make sure that they have a resource to turn to for support.
Support. Say if they just need to, the Friendship Line is what we're talking about. If
Yes.
they need to just talk, is it 24 hours a day? They can call this number.
Correct. The Friendship Line began 40 years ago. This is actually our 40th year.
You're kidding.
So
has it been in Calaveras for 40 years?
No, we've been working with Calaveras for the last 3 years more strategically, because part of our mandate is to make Friendship Line more viable as an option for older people throughout these counties in California that are a bit more rural.
Okay.
And so that's how Katie and I have come to work together in this collaboration because of her work with senior peer counselors.
Right. It's a perfect match.
Yeah,
when you say older people, are we talking 45 and older,
no,
65?
60 plus.
60 plus, okay.
60 plus. Okay. And the origins of the Friendship Line, I actually began the Friendship Line, and it was to identify people who might be at risk of suicide. And one of the difficulties with our program, and I know Katie goes through this as well, is that when we say the word suicide, people are very like, oh my gosh, let's not talk about that. And what we try to say to older people is that sadly and unfortunately, older adults have one of the highest rates of suicide of any age population. And what we also know is that suicide just doesn't happen. You know, suicide occurs over time. And one of the biggest risk factors is depression.
Right.
And so what Katie does, you know, in her work here in Calaveras County is try to identify older people who may be feeling depressed,
Right.
you know.
Who are isolated.
Who are isolated, absolutely. And so that, you know, what Katie's trying to do with her staff and her peer counselors is to say, hey, we have an added resource, you know, through our collaboration, so that, you know, that what Friendship Line has always been trying to do is to break through that isolation, that loneliness, by providing a voice after 5 o'clock. I mean, we operate 24 hours a day, but we're there weekends and holidays, and so it's a real assistance to Katie and her program.
Now, I'm so glad you mentioned suicide, because with the work everyone who watches this knows that I work for Hospice of Amador in Calaveras, and we hear this because of patients, families who are going through tremendous stress, and then even children who have lost a parent. We've had kids, you know, as young as 8 years old to speak about those kinds of thoughts. And some people think that by mentioning the word or talking about it, it makes someone want to do it, as if they wouldn't think of it on their own, and it doesn't work that way. And I am so glad that you have people who are willing to speak about it.
Yes.
That is huge.
The awesome thing about our programs, too, is when we don't have enough volunteers or someone to go out and service somebody, then we refer them to the Friendship Line, actually, and make that connection. And I call after I get permission from the person and give the Friendship Line their information, so that way we make sure that there is follow-up with them, and that way hopefully we can decrease those numbers of suicide.
So the Friendship Line works both ways. The client calls you, and then you are allowed to call them back and you check on them?
Absolutely, if the person wants that.
Yes.
Okay.
So the thing about Friendship Line is we're an accredited suicide prevention crisis intervention line
Nice.
through the American Association of Suicidology. But what is so unique about our program and why it works out so well for the counties is that we're both a hotline, you know, so that we are prepared to work with somebody who may be actively suicidal.
Right.
But we're also a warm line, meaning you don't have to be suicidal to
You just
call.
need to talk.
You just need to call.
Yeah.
You know, if you're feeling blue or feeling lonely or feeling dealing with a family difficulty, and you know, that you can call. And
Right.
that's what Katie and her peer counselors
Is
are
this a
trying to do.
building where you guys work and there's someone sitting by a phone, or is it, are your volunteers at home and it rings a certain line for them?
Well, maybe you could talk about the peer counselors first, and then.
Okay.
Our peer counselors actually go do home visits 1 hour a week, and then we have a supervision meeting once a month for 2 hours to check in with them and make sure that their clients are, of course, are doing okay, and if they need any resources or extra support, then we can intervene and help them out.
Okay.
Otherwise, the peer counselors go in once a week and visit with them. The one thing I always, because I do the intakes with our clients, so the one thing that I make sure to do is always take a Friendship Line brochure, and I let them know if you're depressed or isolated and you're having a hard time sleeping, because most of the time I know when I've gone through my own spurts of depression, it's at night when I'm trying to go to sleep that I lay there and think and dwell about what's happened.
You can't turn it off, right?
Yeah, and so that's when I tell people, that's when you use the Friendship Line. That's the other resource that they can call, even if they have a peer counselor. Definitely, please call the Friendship Line at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep and you're depressed, and if they have a substance abuse, you know, before you go get a beer or drink, call the Friendship Line and talk to them, and so that way you can hopefully get through that stressful moment without resulting to anything else.
Now, the people who work the Friendship Line, they are volunteers, correct, or are they paid employees?
We have volunteers and paid staff, so that if the volunteer, you know, who is trained, is working with somebody who might be very distressed or very bereaved, we have a staff person always on call who will then be able to support that person, particularly on weekends and holidays. And then during the day, from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, we have a staff person who is in there with the volunteers. Because it can be very stressful, as Katie knows.
The holiday time or the...
And the holiday time, I think in particular, but as I said earlier before we started taping, is that it's now this post-holiday when things might not have worked out the way that older person had wanted. They might have thought that this year my estranged son who moved to Michigan is going to come back or call me, and they're holding out hopes that that would happen. And then again, for like the 25th year, there's no call. And it's really this January, February, March is where we see the real difficulty with depression, because now it's a whole nother 12 months or 11 months till the holiday rolls around again.
And even if the holiday was great, there's kind of a letdown after everyone leaves and goes home again, and you find yourself alone again. It can be very depressing.
That is one of the things that I know Katie sees too, is that during the holiday time, you know, family members might come from other counties or other towns and spend 3 or 4 days with their older parent or parents, but then they go away. And now that older person is really stuck.
Even with like neighbors and stuff, you know, during the holidays, everybody seems to go out and do volunteer work or reach out more and have more of a let's all join together. It's amazing. I wish it could be the holidays all year round because of how much people are willing to help out others. And then it seems like after the holidays, it's like, okay, now that they went and met their neighbor and brought them a Christmas dinner, now they're back to their routines and they're worrying about themselves.
Oh God, I'm feeling really bad because I did that. like,
a lot of people do, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah, we'll go and give the neighbors, if someone's, especially if we know that they're alone, a single person or something, give them a little plate of cookies or whatever. And that might be the only only time I see them for months.
Well,
Yeah.
Now I feel guilty.
Well, Maya Angelou, the poet and author, has said that one of the problems with holiday times is that, it's really great in a way that people extend themselves and are very kind or reach out to people, neighbors or family. But what she advocates for is to have the courage, she calls it, to be kind throughout the year.
Yeah.
Not just at Christmas time,
Right.
but to try to make that into a practice.
Yes.
And I think that is so important, particularly with older people who are isolated or alone or dealing with difficult illnesses
Right.
or bereavement or just fears,
Yeah.
fears of dying or dying badly or being alone, nobody will find me. And that's one of the reasons that with Friendship Line, where we'll call out to people,
Yes.
because a lot of older adults are hesitant to ask for help. And I know you see
Yeah.
that all
Oh,
the
yes.
time. Because you can see that if you could just say, hey, help me,
Yeah.
my quality of life could really increase.
Yes.
But to ask for help means to be somewhat vulnerable.
Right.
And a lot of people
A lot
are
of people
hesitant.
feel that, but especially, I think, that generation, the older generation, men especially, but the women too. You guys are tough
I
little
know,
birds,
we are.
Yeah, you don't want to ask for help. I
No.
can do it. Yeah, right? And,
yes.
But
And
there's
that-
nothing wrong with asking.
That's right. But it's so ingrained in men. Men are so
Yeah.
conditioned to do it themselves. And that's why when you look at the suicide stats, men, older men, particularly men 75 plus, are overly represented
That's right.
in those statistics. And they are very, very reluctant because of feelings of shame or weakness.
Yeah.
If I ask for help, then there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Rather than, what a smart thing to do to talk to Katie or to
Exactly.
talk to her peer counselors or to call the Friendship Line
Yeah.
so that you kind of extend your net of support.
Right.
And
I think it's a sign of strength when someone can look at themselves and say, you know what, I'm not doing so well in this certain area. And instead of just going downhill,
Right.
to say, I'm going to face
Yes.
it and I'm going to do something about it. I think that's a
Well,
sign
and
of
a lot
strength.
of times too,
Yes.
if the family members don't live close, they don't tell their family members, so their
Right.
family members can't even advocate for them, which
Yeah.
makes it even harder. So
Yeah.
it's very important for us to get the word out and get
Yeah.
people to know that there are resources and help out there and
Oh, totally.
non-judgmental.
Oh, yeah, so important.
I just-
Now, speaking of this type of person who, well, it's so many of us, but who is very thoughtful, doesn't want to call and ask for help because they don't want to burden anybody else. If someone were to call at 3 o'clock in the morning, is your staff person or your volunteer awake and waiting for a call, or may they be waking somebody up who has a family and is at home? And,
Oh, no.
Okay.
Our volunteers who do the overnight shifts
Right.
are very aware and very prepared for telephone calls.
Okay.
And in the last probably 3 years, we've probably tripled the number of calls we receive in the late night hours, particularly from midnight to 4 a.m. And for the very reason that you're saying, is that they can't go to sleep because now they're worried, or because of health issues, they might have to get up to go to the bathroom several times during the night. And what they feel, and we know that, at 4 a.m.,
Yes.
you feel like you're all alone in the world.
Yeah.
And that's the thing we try to impress upon older people or family members in the counties, is that no, you can call the Friendship Line. You don't have to be in a suicidal crisis. What our goal is to try to reach people before they get to that point.
Right.
Because, that's very, very troubling to think that an older person is sitting there saying, people will be better off without me.
Yeah.
I don't belong anymore. You
Yeah.
used a term earlier that is so important when it comes to identifying people who are suicidal, is feeling like a burden.
Right.
Or I don't belong anymore. And then I have a gun or a firearm somewhere in the house, and then with having a couple
Added cocktail or
Right.
two or
Yeah.
beer
and then you set up this very tense situation
Yes.
Right.
where I impulsively then say, that's it.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is to intercept and intervene.
Instead of reaching for that gun, reach for
The
phone
phone. Yeah.
Right.
and call.
Right.
Yeah. And it's always free.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Even if they were to continue the service, always free.
Yes.
That
Always
is amazing.
free. Yeah, always free.
Now, what if I were to see my neighbor who could use your service, but he's not the type to call you himself? Could I call and ask you to call him?
Well, see, I would suggest calling Katie first.
Okay.
Because then she
Instead
could.
of for a senior peer counseling
Yes,
session.
and I've had that actually happen where I've had a neighbor or a family member call and say,
Yeah.
you know, I'm really worried about my mom or my neighbor, and is there any way? And I simply give them a call and talk to them about our program, let them know what we have to offer, let them know that it's absolutely free. We don't ask for a Medicare number, we don't ask for a credit card, we don't ask any of those.
Yeah.
We simply ask them what they've gone through, what they're going through, if they have any challenges. And sometimes it's amazing that people have signs of depression but don't realize that they have depression.
Right.
And so it's just identifying those and then saying, okay, well, we have someone who would like to come visit with you.
Yeah.
I always volunteer to go with the counselor for the first meeting if they want me to.
Good,
So that way
yeah.
the client feels as safe and comfortable as possible.
Are they allowed to go anywhere if they were to do, not a field trip, but some kind of outing together, or does everything take place in the home?
We let
or
the
in your
client,
office?
the client drives the bus is what I always say.
Oh,
because
nice.
they get to choose how they want to have their meetings. They can choose to either meet them in their home or meet them at a coffee shop till they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I've met with one lady who didn't want me to come into her house but wanted services, and so I met with her and we sat outside in the sun and talked, and
Oh, that's
so
neat.
we completely let them take charge of how it happens. They
Yeah.
start it and they stop it. When they feel like they don't want it anymore, then they just say, I don't need a peer counselor anymore. And we stop services. They are
What happens
completely
if if you know that they really do need it and they stop? Is there another level of help?
Well,
that they
that's
could
where
get?
we do make sure that they have the friendship line.
Yeah.
And I've done periodic calls to check in on them and find out if
Okay.
they want to start a peer counselor
Oh,
again,
yeah,
or
good.
if they're doing okay. I am fortunately have not come across that problem where we've
Good.
had someone stop services who really is in need of having the services.
Oh, good.
And then our volunteers and staff are aware of the services, particularly through Katie. And so our volunteers will also be, talking to that individual too and saying, would you like something more than Friendship Line in terms of Calaveras County? And then we always direct them to Katie and her program. So that what they feel, the idea is to say, you are not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's really the message, whether it comes from here in Calaveras County through Katie or through our volunteers or when I'm here giving talks. The idea is to remind people that, the problem with being an older adult in our particular situation here in this country is that older people, and I'm 66, and I feel it, which is you are invisible, as an older person. Many older people are just not perceived as vital parts of their communities, simply because you have garnered more birthdays. Like it wasn't your fault.
Right.
The worst thing to be in America today is to be old. And so everybody is like anti-aging. Anti-aging this, anti-aging that. And when you,
face wash.
it's one thing when I
I'm
think,
saving up for a lifestyle lift.
well, when it's more of a, you see the absurdity in it.
Right, right.
But if you are 70 or 80 or 90 and you're sitting there watching the TV and you see all of this about to be anything other than who you are, the problem in our culture is that we're impoverishing the meaning of getting older in our society. Rather than in some societies, older people are looked at as wise, as contributors.
Yes.
But in our culture, we've really made a wrong turn.
Yeah, that is so sad.
And
It
we've
is.
got to figure it out because, I know I'm quite a bit older than both of you, but you will be my age also,
Yeah.
and older. And I really believe that we have an opportunity to change the way in which we look at older adults in this country. And part of that is through your peer counseling program, part of it's through the Friendship Line, part of it's through all the different geriatric services. What we're trying to do is to say, you know, you have value. You know, even though you perceive society as saying you are valueless, you know. And it's a real, I just feel like it's such an honor to talk with older people.
What makes me so sad is thinking about the stories that die with each person as they die, as maybe the person physically dies, but even if they just stop telling their story, it's gone.
See, there's an African proverb that says when an older person dies in one of the villages, they've lost a library of information.
And
I
that
think
just gave me chills.
You know, I think that's so. I think that's what so many of probably your viewers are going to be saying to themselves, which is they are the kin keeper in the family. They know what happened to Uncle Bob back in 1936, where other family members don't know that
or may not even know who he is.
Well, that's right. But as we get older, I think that what happens, we get more interested in our backgrounds, in our family trees. And then we want to know what happened to Uncle Bob, but the person who had all that information died.
That's right.
You know, and then we just don't have that anymore. And it's really a shame, you know.
You guys have such important messages to tell. Do you guys go around and speak at schools or service groups or places like that? I would love to come and hear you talk some more.
Well. He does speaking all the time. I'm like, he's a great speaker. I've watched him probably 6 times, and I get super excited like it's my first time going to hear him speak, because the messages that he gives out and the way that he gives them are so down to earth and in language that you can understand. He's not talking in doctor language, is what I call it, where it's the terminology. He's using layman's terms, and he talks to you just about the way it is and how society is with seniors and how they kind of just put them off to the side.
And it's so nice that you don't do it in a way that makes anyone feel ugly or horrible. It's but it's honest.
Well, see, we have to face reality, and the reality doesn't look so great as we get older in this culture. But that being said, is that what we try to remind older people, again, as I said, is that you have value, you have worth, and don't let anybody take that away from you. You know, one thing that's coming up that I know Katie's aware of is that Elder Care Conference in March. That's at the Calaveras County Fairgrounds,
at Angels Camp.
In March?
In March in Angels Camp.
Have you guys already put out a save the date? I don't know if I have that one.
You know, I think that information is out there, and I think it's like the second week in March.
I think it's coming out,
I definitely want to be
They're coming out with their flyers. I will make sure to get you information
thank
for
you.
it. Yes.
And I'll be speaking at that one.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, and I really loved that, particularly where the audience are seniors. It's like I call them my people.
Yes.
You know, and I see that gray hair. I'm like very happy. And you know, and that's well. But the other thing too that I'm really glad you said that, which is it's not about the gloom and doom. You know, we know suicide happens, depression happens, but what we try to say is that you don't have to kill yourself. You know, depression can be remediated.
Yes, it can.
But you got to be able to recognize it, just as we look at physical issues, you know, physical health issues, and you look at high blood pressure, you look at diabetes, or you look at this, and then you take steps to work with that and deal with it. And the same is true of these mental health issues, that it's not a death sentence, you know, and we've got to break the silence and speak the truth about depression and anxiety and worries and fears. Because if we have somebody to talk to, you know, a senior peer counselor or a volunteer at the Friendship Line or, you know, somebody else, even what you said about, you know, I have a neighbor, could I just give them the Friendship Line? Absolutely, you can give them that number. And just as Katie was saying about, you know, really protecting the confidentiality of that older adult, they can call and they can simply say, I'm calling from Angels Camp or I'm calling from San Andreas. They don't even have to give their name.
Really?
You know, they can be anonymous. Absolutely. Because what I want them to understand is that we're not going to exploit you.
Yeah.
We're not going to expose you.
It's not going to be in the
know.
Calaveras Enterprise that you call the friendship
That's
line
right.
at 3 o'clock in
That's
the
right.
morning.
Well, trust is so important to everybody, but especially if you're finally decided you're going to reach out to somebody.
Right.
Yes.
That's number one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if you're a
trust.
frail
Yeah.
adult and you reach out to somebody, you want to know that they're not going to have adult protective services at your house
Yeah.
going,
Oh, yeah.
oh, are you suicidal? Are you going to hurt
Yeah.
yourself?
Right.
But they're not going to take it to that extreme.
Right.
They're going to listen and support you and get you resources if you need them.
Yeah.
Right.
So you guys cover so many different areas. I can only
Yes.
imagine how much training your staff and volunteers go through. Do you, we need a huge list, but they do suicide prevention, they, family
Substance
relations,
abuse.
okay? So,
Family dynamics, bereavement, how to work with an older person that might have had losses over the lifetime,
Yeah.
and how do you talk to someone like that? Just being able to talk to older adults and, in the fashion that we're doing that,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is just
Talk
talk.
to 'em.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a clinical interview.
right.
Yes.
This is just person to person, that we care about you, what's going on, what motivated you to call, and let's explore that. And if you are ready to hang up, okay, but you can always call back. That's the thing with Friendship Line is that, if you called and you had a good experience, you can always call back.
Can you talk to the same person?
Well, that's not as
Okay.
easy, only because volunteers have different shifts.
Sure, okay, that makes sense.
But if somebody wants a call out, generally those call outs, we'll call out to that older person.
Okay.
That's usually a particular time of day that
Sure.
is negotiated between that older person
Sure.
and the staff. And so the person who, if they say, I would prefer a call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesdays, well, it might be the same person
Yeah.
who covers that particular
That sounds
shift.
good.
That's the one thing I love about the Friendship Line, too, is they always ask, would you like us to call you back?
Right.
So that way it gives that open door feeling
Right.
instead of, okay, I got to wait till it's 3 o'clock in the morning again and I can't sleep and
Yeah.
I'm going through this. Knowing that they'll call back the next day if you want them to and check in on you and find out how the rest of your night was and is there anything else
so
you want
neat.
to talk about. That's the most amazing feeling to me, to be able to refer somebody and know that they can get whatever they want, whether it's a call back or not. So.
Yeah.
I
Now,
said
I'm
it's about
48. Is there any
connections.
chance that you guys might lower the age to that? Because I want to call and talk
So
to you.
you could become a volunteer.
Yes.
We'll put you in on that level.
Any excuse to keep in touch with you, too.
The
You guys
one
are
thing I
great.
tell people too, though, is everybody goes through challenges in life.
Yeah.
Whether you're 8,
Right.
28, 48, 68, 78, 98, you go through challenges. It's having the courage, like you said, to ask for assistance or ask for
Yeah.
help.
It's like nobody has the corner on suffering.
Right.
We all suffer.
Right.
The important aspect is it's so much better to share those difficult feelings.
Yeah.
Through connections, and connections are what bind us to life.
That's right. And
Yeah.
you guys open up their world so much by giving them someone to speak with. We're almost out of time, but I can imagine how lonely and small your world must feel if you're an older person and can't get out on your own and
Yes.
do what you want when you want to do it. Gosh, we are almost out of time, and I see the number at the bottom there. Do you guys have a website that people can go to also, or the phone number is the best way to reach you?
Yes.
To learn about
Correct.
senior peer counseling or the Friendship Line.
Right, and if you want senior peer counseling and you don't have that number easily accessible, you can call Friendship Line,
Okay.
Yes.
which is on the screen, and then we'll direct them to Katie and
Yes.
her staff. And-
You guys, thank you so much for doing what you do.
Thank you for letting us come and talk to you
Absolutely.
about it.
Yeah, we're
Anytime.
delighted.
I am huge fans
passion
of
to our
yours.
hearts.
I
Yeah.
love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time on Tammy's Window on Calaveras.